Well, welcome back to the next video in my garage room conversion. So today we're going to work on the door that leads into the room and the trim. Right here I am demonstrating how to determine if your door is a right hand or left hand swing. With the door open, just place your back against the side with the hinges and see whether you use your left or right hand to open the door. This one opens to the left. Therefore, this is a left hand door. Now, I had thought about going and getting a new door that's right-hand swing and just have it swing the opposite direction but into the room. The other option was to use the existing door, which is what I decided to do. And initially I thought that that would work out well because when the door is open, it would cover the electric panel in the wall. However, I then realized that it would also cover up the light switch for the room. So after doing a little bit of investigating, I've come up with a solution that I think is going to work out really well, and it will not require any additional wiring. So in the next video, we'll show you how we're going to resolve that situation of the light switch being behind the door. I used my 4-foot level to do an initial check to see if the opening is plumb on the side that the hinges are mounted to. And it's out a little bit, but we can easily take care of that with some shims. The hinge side is the most critical side to make sure it is plumb, and then that will be the last time we use the level on the door installation because we will shift to using the door slab itself to make sure the frame is square. And after getting the hinge side of the jamb secured, we will move across the top of the door opening, checking the reveal to make sure that the opening is square. So the reveal is the space between the door and the jamb. We want to make sure to keep that gap consistent across the top. We know the door itself is square, and so if we keep that gap consistent, then we know that the frame also is square to the door. And once we have the top of the door jamb secured and in place, then we will move to the opposite side to make sure it is attached to the wall. And again, we're just going to keep an eye on the gap between the door and the frame to make sure it is square. Now, generally, I run the nails through the shims to hold them in place. But on this side here, the only way to check the gap and then nail the door is to check the gap with the door closed and then open it up to nail it in place. So what I've done is put the shims about in where I think they need to be and then put a couple of nails underneath the shims so that it kind of holds it tight. But if I close the door and find out that I still need to close up that gap a little bit, the nails are not through the shims, and so I can tap those shims in a little bit tighter. I always try to make sure I get some shims near the strike plate for the doorknob, since that area of the door frame will take a little bit of pressure from the doorknob closing. And then from there, about every 16 to 20 inches, some additional shims. And now that we've got all the shims installed, I'll just go around the door frame with my oscillating tool and trim those all off. Sometimes you can score and break them with just a utility knife. I find that works a little easier with the cedar shims than the pine ones. And now we're ready to move on to trimming the door out. So fortunately, the molding was already cut to length because this is the same molding that I removed from the door, and so installation is a breeze. For the first trip around, I'll use longer nails into the framing around the door, and then I'll make a second pass using shorter nails going through the trim directly into the door jamb. And with that, our door is installed. So a fresh coat of paint and a new doorknob, and we're ready to go. So we'll clean up the mess here and move on to the cove base. Because this room is in the corner of my garage, 2 of the walls are exterior walls and are concrete block at the bottom, and then the rest of the room is drywall. So the product I'm using here is Cove Base, which is more generally found in a commercial application, It's a vinyl product that glues to the wall, and since 2 of my walls are concrete block, which would make it incredibly difficult to use any type of fastener, I figured gluing would be the only option whether I used baseboard or cove base. Because it is flexible, I figured it would help disguise any imperfections in the concrete floor below and also adhere to the textured surface of the concrete block. The adhesive I'm using here is Loctite Power Grab All-Purpose. You want to use something that has a good immediate tack so that it sticks while it's still wet and then has good hold for the long term. After stretching the product out along the wall, I just lay it down and then I ran 3 beads of caulking or adhesive on the back of it to make sure it holds to the wall. The top bead of caulking I held down about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch to make sure that when I press it up against the wall that it doesn't squish out over the trim. Because this product is flexible, it can be a little bit challenging to measure if you're working by yourself. Sometimes I find it's easier just to go ahead and lay it out against the wall, stretch it out and mark it, and then cut it. Even though this base cove is only about 1/8 of an inch thick, there is a flare at the bottom which sticks out, so it will cover all of the gaps that we left around the perimeter of the floor for expansion joints. You could probably use some sort of roller to ensure that you're getting good adhesion between the base and the wall. I didn't have one, so I took a rigid putty knife and wrapped a cloth rag around it and used it as kind of a rigid squeegee to make sure I was getting the cove base pressed firmly against the wall and getting the glue spread out well. And that's going to wrap up this video. So make sure you tune in for the next video where I show you how we're going to take care of that light switch which is now behind the door with no additional wiring. Thanks for watching.